Hi, and welcome to the Feet of Jesus, where we go through the entire Bible, one book at a time. We are in the book of Acts, and we're almost finished with Acts. So we have today, I'm going to go over Acts 27, which was the homework last week. Then you have one more week of homework, Acts 28, and then next Saturday or Sunday, I will film a video recapping Acts 28, and we will be finished with Acts. And for a while, we will be finished with the New Testament. We will come back after we handle a little bit of business in the Old Testament. So what does that mean for you? So I just want to give you a heads up that, like I said, September 5th, we will finish the book of Acts. Then something unprecedented is going to happen. I'm going to give you a week off. So you're going to get a week off. What I really recommend is bathe yourself in whatever the Holy Spirit tells you to in the book of Luke and Acts. Skim it. If there's a chapter that God tells you, just read this one again. Read it and think about what you learned through this whole study of Luke and Acts so far. And then you get the week off, but I don't. On September 13th, I am going to film a video. So come right back and watch a video whenever you normally watch these videos. Watch the next one where I am going to go step by step on how to study for Genesis. It's going to be different. With the New Testament, we get it real up close and we look at individual verses and small passages. With the Old Testament, we pull it away from us and we study bigger chunks of scripture. If you've already purchased the book, then you have seen, and this is the book, if you've already purchased it, then you have seen that it looks a little different. So on September 13th, I'm going to film a video on how to study this. So that gives you 2 weeks to get this book. If you have not purchased it yet, do it. Do it. I always try to make you feel just fine if you don't want to. This time, do it. This is really going to help you delve into the Old Testament and the foundations of the Old Testament. It'll help, the foundations of the Old Testament will help us when we come back into the new again. And so buy the book. And then on September 20th, I'm going to recap the first week of homework, which is going to be Genesis 1 and 2. So that is what's coming. A little bit of ministry news. We have a podcast. Please come and look at it. It's available wherever podcasts are available. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that kind of thing, and several smaller ones. It's called Grace-Full. Grace-Full Stories, Living and Learning That God's Got This. It is stories from guests, and I am learning so much from these videos. So here on YouTube, what we do is in-depth Bible study. The podcast is really living life and learning to have immense compassion for each other and learning to understand what we can do for each other and maybe what we shouldn't do for each other. I've already learned things that maybe I've said before, trying to comfort someone that maybe I should reword based on what guests have already told me because I'm filming ahead. So anyway, come join us on the podcast. And then I'm probably going to have a little bit of a surprise for you either next week or when we start back up on September 20th. I have a new book coming out that is not in regards to these workbooks, and it's going to be a great present for your friends who have kids going to college. So we are in this book this week and next week. It is the book of Acts, and it will be a lot of fun to get through together. So let's go to it. I'm going to do a little bit of a small paraphrase of Acts 27 because so much of it is very applicable to our lives. We have Paul on the road, which is on the water. He's on the road to Rome. So he is getting to Rome, and it's all aboard ship. And there's a big storm and a lot of things happen. And so storm and trials are so synonymous. And so right from the start, you're going to be able to see ways you can apply this to your life. So let's get into it. So Paul, I think we can all say that Paul was completely in the will of God, right? Yeah, Paul was in the will of God. but he still went through a storm, a big storm. So we can go through trials and storms in our life, even though we are in the will of God. I have a whole little thing I'm going to tell you when we get done with this, and it'll help you distinguish how to figure all that out. So verse number 2 said that he was allowed to have companions. And in verse 2, it says us, that we went. Let me see verse 2. We put to sea, meaning to sail along the coasts of Asia. We. Who's we? I really love when I see we and us in Luke and Acts. So one of them is Paul. We know that, right? Well, who's the other one? It is Luke, because Luke wrote Luke and Acts. So it's interesting that he was given the permission to have companions go with him, because most of the time, of course, prisoners weren't allowed that. And that really, I think, goes to Agrippa probably figuring out and pretty much thinking that Paul was innocent. And so he was going to give him a little bit more leeway. Verse 3 is interesting because it tells us that the person in charge on the ship let Paul go, the centurion, let Paul go and see friends in that port. So they went a little ways and then stopped at a port, and then they transferred the prisoners to another ship to go, and that's where the big storm happened. But it's interesting that he let him go and go see friends, because if Paul had just taken off, then the person in charge of the prisoner who left would have that punishment done to him. So they didn't want their prisoners to leave and escape. So he must have truly, truly, truly trusted him. And I always said to my children when they were little, who are the people that you admire most in school? And they would tell me friends of theirs and stuff. And many, many times it was people who God shone through their eyes. And I think that's what's happening here. I think the centurion is truly seeing, this is Heather's opinion, but I think the centurion is seeing God through Paul's eyes and trusting him for it. So the ship that they are transferred to is an Egyptian grain ship. We know it's a ship from Alexandria, and that's Alexandria, Egypt. And in verse 38, we find out that it was a grain ship. So that's how we know that. To tell you a little bit about the ship, it was 180 feet long, it was 50 feet wide, and the hull was 44 feet deep. It was a big ship. I have some information on here. There was no rudder, so it was hard to control. There was one mast, and it was said to be a very sturdy ship. But since it only had the one mast, and since it only had one sail, and since it had no rudder, it was very difficult to control in problem situations. And we're going to have a problem situation, right? So, verse 9 says that they were done fasting, in case you're interested. The fasting was for the Day of Atonement. So there were a lot of times when people would paint their face white and stand on the corner and oohing and moaning because they didn't have food and they wanted to show off that they were fasting and how pious they were. But there was only one day a year that Jews were required to fast, and that was on the Day of Atonement, and that was in verse 9. A couple other things before we get to the storm, because we're going to start applying this storm to our life. This was a horrible storm. The only way they navigated at that time was through the stars. So if there's clouds up in the sky, are they going to be able to navigate well? No. So they couldn't navigate because it was cloudy. In verse 28, it says they took soundings. And they took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms. So one fathom was about 6 feet. A sounding was when they'd have a rope and then a weight at the bottom of the rope, and they would let the rope down off the edge of the ship, and they would measure how far it was from the top of the water to the sea floor. And so that's what they were trying to find out, so that they wouldn't ground the ship. But God told them they were going to ground the ship. So did they ground the ship? Yes, they did. Okay, so let's do some principles of storms. And after that, we're going to get to what should we do in storms. So principles of storms, 3 principles. Number 1, they will change your comfort. Did they change Paul's comfort? Oh yeah, I'm sure. Did it change the men on the ship's comfort? Absolutely. Those poor guys were, they were panicked. And so yes, it changed their comfort. Does it change our comfort to be in a storm? Yes, and so we fight so hard not to be in storms. And then sometimes I think we fight so hard not to be in a storm that we can't fully enjoy when we're not in a storm because we're worried about what's going to happen during the storm. Does that sound like you? Sounds like me. But I've really worked on releasing that and enjoying the storm because it's a little gift. It's taking Psalm 23 in here. It's being able to sit in the green grass right by the stream. He will lead me beside quiet waters. I need to sometimes sit and enjoy the quiet waters and rest. And if you're not in a storm, that's what you should do. But principle number 2, they will change your values and what you value. And so did this storm change the people's values that they had on the ship? Bet your bottom dollar they did. They threw the grain overboard. If they didn't deliver what they were supposed to deliver, nobody got paid. So they put all of their life in danger and spent all this time on this ship. And they threw they threw their paycheck overboard. They threw furniture overboard. They threw everything overboard. Has that happened to you? I remember a long time ago, Mackenzie, my daughter, was about 5, and she had a really scary health issue where we had to call an ambulance, and I had to get Alan to meet me at the hospital, and it was terrifying. And I remember not knowing what was going on and not knowing if she was going to live or die and how horrible it was. And right before everything happened, I was so stressed out and I was so worried about my work I was doing and this project I had to complete and dinner I had to take care of and what the kids were doing. And I was so stressed out. And 30 minutes after, the second I saw Alan, and Alan wrapped me in his arms and said, Mackenzie's going to be fine. And she was totally fine. But the minute he did, I realized I didn't care about work. I didn't care about the project. I didn't care about anything else except my faith and my child. So have you ever had that kind of storm where it totally changed your values? Okay, principle number 3 is they'll bring out the best in you or the worst in you. It brought out the best in Paul. Paul became a real leader on that ship. It probably brought out the worst in those other men. They were so terrified. And I've been in a lot of storms. I'm sure you all have too. And I will have to say that the worst is the initial thing that happens with me. The worst thing is my first thing, and I'm panicked. And then I go, no, push it away. And I sometimes have to physically push the panic and worry away in order to grab on that faith and trust I have in God. And they had to do that also. They had to get to a point where they were going to listen to God and listen to God through Paul. Okay, so let's get to 7 points on what we should do in storms. So we are applying this to our life at this point through exactly what Paul did. So let's look at that. Step number 1, make sure you are in the will of God. If you are in the will of God, you are right where you need to be. If you are not in the will of God, get in the will of God. If you ever need help trying to figure out that dynamic, comment on any video, even if it has nothing to do with this, and I'll talk it through with you. Absolutely. So number 2, when you are in the when you are in the will of God, respectfully and humbly feel free to speak up. Paul did. Paul did a couple times, and it saved their lives. Number 3, provide help in the situation where you can. Paul did. Paul did. He was a full member of that ship, and so provide help. Even like in Paul's situation, if they had listened to him in the first place, they wouldn't be trying to fight for their lives, but he still helped. He didn't sit back and go, well, if you would have listened, then, I'm not going to do anything because you guys should have listened to me. He got involved and he helped. Number 4, find hope in Jesus. If you belong to God, then your saving is his responsibility. So I know with my children's lives, with my husband's life, with my parents' life, with my friends and family, I like to try to do everything I can to help them and to help them with all sorts of facets of their life. In reality, that's not my responsibility. That's not my job. My children are grown adults. When you have little tiny children, yes, you have a big responsibility with that. But my children are grown adults. That is their responsibility, and it's between them and God. And their ultimate saving, or their ultimate time when they get to go and be in heaven, is between them and God. And God's in charge of that. That's God's responsibility. So number 5 is one of my favorites. Realize that if you are on a mission from God, you are invincible until he is finished with you. So that is seen in Revelation 9. It is seen here in Acts 27. Paul was on a mission from God. God told Paul when he was in that prison a few chapters ago, you are going to go testify for me in Rome. Remember? So Paul is on a mission from God. So is that ship going to fall apart to the point that Paul drowns? No. Can anything happen to Paul before Paul is finished with his mission? No. We will study next week that when Paul's mission is up, when his mission is finished, is when Paul goes and is with God. The same with the 2 witnesses in Revelation 9. They are killed when their mission is finished. So, do you need to worry about the time that you go and be with God? No, you don't. It's going to happen when your mission is finished. And there's very little that we need to worry about with that. So if you are supposed to be here for the next 10 years, can COVID get you? No. So anyway, you can just take that. And I love that point. It's a point that I hold on to that I love. Number 6, trust God that he knows what he's doing. I love when Paul speaks up for the second time and says, you guys should have listened to me, but now that you are listening to me, we need to eat and we need to do a few things. And you're going to listen to me now. And then Paul goes and eats. I love that. And so Paul trusted God to know what he was doing with that. He didn't question God. He said, okay, if we're going to survive this, I'm going to keep everybody on this ship and we're going to survive this together. And then number 7, be thankful. And I know that's hard to do in the midst of the storm. And you know what? Sometimes we have to require things to come out of our mouth that our heart isn't feeling yet. And that's okay. Sometimes we have to be thankful in the midst of the storm when you're terrified. Sometimes you have to forgive verbally before your heart is ready to forgive. The emotions will always come after that, even if they didn't come before that, because God is so compassionate and gracious. He will provide the feelings to come with what we have willfully made come out of our mouth. Promise. Okay, we are finished with our overview. Now let's go to our 3 verses. We'll see if we have time for 3 verses. I'm going to do 2 rather quickly, and then 1 I'm going to give a little bit more time to. So the first one is Acts 27:20, and I'll read that. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of ours being saved was at last abandoned. Everybody thought they were going to die. So we need to picture the scene. The scene, cloudy. The ship is being tossed everywhere. They cannot see where they're going. They don't have any control over this. God allowed them to get into a place where the only thing they could trust was him through Paul. And he does that for us today. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have tried every single which way to solve something only to realize I needed to let go of the control and give the control to God because God could handle it. Boy, how much easier my life would be if before I tried to solve all the problem with all the different things, I would just hand God the control of that. I think that would help us all. Okay. And then I am going to go into a little bit more detail with this one. So it's Acts 27:35. And when he had said these things, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all. He broke it and began to eat. I can just picture this. This is right after the second time that Paul talked to the guys. He said, guys, if you'd listened to me, we wouldn't be in this ship, in this situation, but we are. And so you haven't eaten for a long time. You need to eat. You need to get your strength. And then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do after that. Okay, that's Heather's paraphrase. But then he acted on that. And he sat in a boat that was being pushed everywhere, all over the water. He sat in the boat and ate. I know that his encouragement, his obeying God and his listening to God really gave courage to those men that were on that ship because he obeyed God and because he was a leader. They were able to follow him and they were able to have peace and eat also and then follow directions. So, are you a leader? I'll answer that for you. You are. If you are a child of God, you are a leader. And we need to be, when God tells us sit and eat and then go solve the problem, we need to sit and eat and then go solve the problem because people are watching us. People are watching how we solve these problems. And it will be handy and helpful for them and give them courage to see you having that courage. I know it's hard, especially with some situations. But, this happened recently with me and my family. So in the beginnings of COVID and the whole panic and there was no toilet paper and all that stuff, my parents, who are in their upper 70s, were a little concerned about it. And they were trying not to leave the house and everything. And I finally just said, I think at the end of the day, God is either sovereign or he's not. He's either in total control of this situation or he's not. That point number 5 of what to do in a storm. If you're on mission from God, nothing can happen to you. And if God wants you to go from COVID, you will go from COVID, but there's stuff he has you doing from here until then. So get in there, live life. Be careful. We need to wear our masks when we're out in public. My parents don't shake hands anymore. They do the elbows and they stay away 6 feet away from people and that stuff. That's all good. And that's just being sensical and that's having logic on your side and that kind of thing. But they're not afraid and they're living life, and praise God, because you know what? Them listening to God about not being afraid has given me encouragement to do exactly the same thing and not being afraid. So they listen to me and I'm listening to them, and it's this wonderful back and forth. So Lee and Jotina Trussell, kudos to you. Love ya. Okay, so last thing I want to say, and it's an awesome verse. It's an awesome little thing. So it's Acts 27:44. And the rest on planks or on pieces of ship. And so it was that all were brought safely to land. God kept his promise. Go figure. If a promise is of God, it will be kept. So be encouraged. know that God's got this. God knows what's going to happen. Listen, obey, and be encouraged in life. Those are the lessons for today, folks. And they are such important lessons in this day and age. So, what are we going to put at the feet of Jesus today? We are going to put fear. We do that a lot, but we're going to put fear at the feet of Jesus. We are going to put the desire to control things at the feet of Jesus. And we are going to put storms and trials. And we're going to let God be in control of those storms and those trials. What do you think? So, my friends, I know several people who are going through all sorts of trials, and I'm loving you through it, and I'm thinking about you through it. We had one of our lovely women who watched this video who was in the path of the last hurricane, and I believe she is doing fine. So, love you. And friends, I love you. Please subscribe and like and tell your friends. We have 7 more people still till we get to 100 and I do something silly. So, love you. Mwah. God's got this.